Time to kick off this Kamen Rider April with my first season of Kamen Rider that I watched, Kamen Rider OOOs. So why this season in particular? Well, when I asked for recommendations for what seasons to watch, this was one of the answers. Then I looked a bit into it before watching to see if this would interest me, and by golly did it ever do that. Quick shout out to Manga Kamen for getting me started with this series, by the way. Kamen Rider Rose is the 12th Heisei era season that aired from September 5th, 2010 to August 28th, 2011, which you'd think would count as an anniversary season, but it doesn't. The next one after it, however, does. It takes a 2 episode structure that most Kamen Rider seasons use that came after Den-O. I'm fine with the structure overall as long as it doesn't feel padded out, which thankfully I feel this season has the least amount of padding compared to the other seasons using this structure. So, what's this season about? The Greed have reawakened thanks to a mysterious arm by the name of Ankh. The Greed are creatures that are powered by core metals and cell metals. The latter are acquired by making creatures known as yummies from people's desires. These desires can be mundane shit like wanting to be more beautiful or getting richer, or much grander ambitions like perfect justice and the like. It's honestly a very neat idea, showing how the desires of man can lead to awful things being done. While Ankh was reawakening his fallen brethren, he also took with him a belt that can be used with the core metals to form Kamen Rider OOOs, which was used to kill the Greed in the first place. Ankh ends up coming across a weird dude named Eiji Hino, who accidentally takes one of his core metals and decides that he can use him to find the rest of his core metals. So he gives him the OOO's belt and he becomes this season's Kamen Rider, which can use 3 core metals to transform and mix and match for so many kinds of combos. He also helps clean up the Greed alongside the Kogami Foundation, led by Kosei Kogami, who was introduced singing Happy Birthday. Don't ask. Honestly speaking, the first episode is so great for establishing everything the season is about. From the bombastic opening fight with the Greed, the transformation of Eiji, the colorful visuals, and the paint the walls white soundtrack. Holy fucking shit. If I decided to rank every first episode of each season, then OOOs would be absolutely near the top. It does everything a first episode should do and then some. So as mentioned before, the season takes on the 2 episode structure. A conflict is introduced and it gets resolved in the next episode, all while the main overarching plot builds up. It's a structure that can work well as long as it feels like it deserves to be split up into 2 episodes, and for the most part, all the Kamen Rider seasons that use this structure does fall under that umbrella. It can easily fall apart if there are too many episodes that don't contribute to the main plot. So before we go to the main plot, let's talk about other aspects of the show, as the structure and plot aren't the only things going on with these shows.
変身
The main writer, Eiji motherfucking Hino. He's introduced in the weirdest way imaginable, but he's still such a fantastic character. He at first seems like a hobo who just travels around the world so he can find people to protect and befriend. His abiding rule is that all you need in life is a pair of underwear to wear for tomorrow. He's a very selfless guy who will take a fucking beating to protect everyone. An admirable trait to say the least for a hero, but kind of generic, right? Right? Well, here's where his actual past comes into play. He's the son of a politician who traveled the world with his grandfather, and during his time traveling, he went through a very life-changing experience. While in Africa, he becomes friends with a little girl named Rue, and while at her village, he ends up being roped into a civil war which kills Rue and has him captured and held for ransom. After his family pays the ransom to free him, they use the situation to gain support with the public, which caused Eiji to cut ties with his family and continue traveling the world, hence why he's a hobo. The situation turned him into someone who has no selfish desires, which ties wonderfully into the themes of the season. Heck, another aspect of him ties into this as well, but I'll save that for the story portion later. Overall, I love Eiji Hino. An amazing character who is also just fucking hilarious and has a great dynamic between him and Ankh that I'll go more into later. As where I'd rate him as a main writer, he's still my favorite of the main writers, although some have come close to beating him out in this regard, but he's still my favorite overall. So I mentioned the Greed and how great their introduction is, but how about we talk about them in more depth? Because I have a lot of things to say about them. Each of them represent a different type of animal, as well as their own types of desires to try and become more like humans. Uva with his headstrong attitude, which actually changes a bit later on in the story as he needs to hide himself and then starts becoming scared of getting more power. Kazari with his slimy tactics. Gamel with his intellect of a brick and acts like a child while trying to feel any kind of sensation, mainly taste, when he tries eating candy. And Mezul with her caring attitude and wanting to feel love. They tie really well into the themes of the season, and you actually feel bad for most of them once they get killed, as they all go out in a very sad way. Mostly, fuck Kazari. There was one other Greed not yet mentioned, but we'll save him for later. Before talking about more of the story, there are 2 other things I want to mention quickly about this show, and I'll cover both in the segment as they tie into each other. The fucking music and color. As you've seen with the clips being used in this review, you'll notice that O's is a very colorful season, and I honestly love the aesthetics here. Everything is so vibrant, the suit of O's is just way too good looking, especially with all the different combos it can use. The full combo suits especially look great, my favorite of them being Tajador. Then we have the nut-bustingly fantastic music. The opening is so fucking good I can't put it into words. It's so jazzy and fits the action perfectly, and it is also still my favorite opening from Kamen Rider. You'll also notice that I've ranked every other Kamen Rider season minus a Showa era for this ranking, since I've heard the openings from those seasons. The in-suit themes are also way too fucking good. Regret Nothing, Got to Keep It Real, Right on Right Time Judge Doll, Sun Goes Up, Power to Terror. Almost every song used in the show is way too fucking good that it's unreal. So yes, OS is my favorite OST as well. To pick a favorite song from the season, Time Judge Doll fits the dynamic of Ankh and Eiji perfectly, which fits especially as both of them sing this song, and Eiji sings almost every other insert song. I'd rank Time Judge Doll as my third favorite song in all of Kamen Rider. I wish I could play these more for you guys, but well, content ID is a bitch for this series.
変身
As the Kogami Foundation and O's fight off the greed, they need more firepower to counteract them. So Dr. Maki creates the birth system that uses cell metals to power it. The first person, at least in the show, to use the system is Akira Date, a pretty down-to-earth dude who needs 100 million yen, which is why he signed up for a dangerous job like this. Akira overall doesn't have much of a character outside of that for a good while. He's a nice guy, but he's kind of bland until he starts training Shintaro to take the mantle of birth once he's done collecting his money. Shintaro was introduced in the beginning of the series as a soldier for the Kagami Foundation, but ended up feeling useless thanks to O's being able to fight the greed more efficiently. He's a very emotionless and cold person at the start thanks to being a soldier, but slowly opens up as he asks for help from others, like Erika Satonaka, who's the secretary of the foundation, who, well, let's be honest, is kind of a non-character. She has two gimmicks, fighting in weird outfits and eating a shit ton of cake. As Akira trains Shintaro, he starts to collapse during battles as we find out that he has a bullet lodged in his skull that he needs removed, hence why he needs all that money. It gets to the point where he has to betray O's and fight alongside the greed after being blackmailed to get his money, but ultimately he doesn't go through with it. After getting knocked unconscious, Shintaro takes the mantle of becoming birth. And after this event, Akira gets his money and he leaves to get his surgery and also set up a medical school in the village where Eiji was captured, as Akira was also involved in that civil war, which doesn't get touched on that much in the series, as Eiji suddenly remembers where he saw Akira and we get that story. After he leaves Japan, Shintaro takes over his birth and completes his arc of becoming a new birth. Akira does come back later on to help out with the prototype birth that Maki had made, but not much else is done with the both of them after that point. When it comes to ranking them, it's kind of a weird situation. They both take the same spot as the both of them are birth. Kamen Rider Birth is my 7th favorite secondary rider. I like the both of them, but vastly prefer a large amount of other secondary riders. Now that most of these aspects of the show are done being talked about, we just have the rest of the plot to talk about, as well as Ankh's role and everything. To go back a bit, after Ankh and Eiji team up together, he takes over a mortally wounded police officer's body to move around more freely, who turns out to be the brother of a random girl Eiji ran into earlier. Her name is Hina Izumi, and she's alright as far as supporting characters go. Her main trait is her gorilla strength and wanting to take care of her brother, who is stuck with Ankh for the meantime. As time goes on, she starts to care for Ankh, and that's really it for her. The main setting all of these characters interact in is a restaurant called Kukusie, run by a fucking bizarre person, Chiyoko Shiraishi, who doesn't do much in the story besides get Ankh to act more polite, which leads to really funny interactions. O's is honestly a really funny series, and it mainly comes from her and Ankh. Not much story happens for a while. It's mostly the greed trying to get their core metals back and losing more of them to O's, which gets some new forms until Dr. Maki shows up. He's a very interesting dude, to say the least. He carries around this creepy fucking doll and talks about endings, especially for the world. Subtle, I know. At first, he was interested in studying the core metals that O's uses. Then he turns to the greed after speaking with Kazari, which led to a very weird experiment with putting in core metals of other greed inside of Gamel to see if they can handle it and become stronger. After Gamel is unable to control this, Maki joins the side of the greed to continue using them as experiments until he gets implanted with 5 mysterious purple core metals and becomes a greed. Once this happens, he wants to have the greed go berserk and ultimately destroy the world with him being the last one standing. There is also this backstory of his sister, who he loves despite her basically torturing him mentally with his talk of true value being in something that has ended, which led him to burning down her bedroom and killing her. Speaking of those purple core metals, 5 of them go inside of Eiji's body, which gives him another form and slowly turns him into a greed. God, I love this final form so much. The purple looks so good, the axe that goes with the form looks sick as hell, the song PuToTyra is such a good song. The dinosaur aesthetic is just neat overall, and it's also nice to see here, because while Super Sentai used the dinosaur aesthetic way too much, Kamen Rider doesn't really use it as it tends to go for a grasshopper motif in the Showa era, and mostly a beetle motif for the Heisei era. The only complaint I have about the form or the wings is they don't look all that great in motion thanks to the weird CG to it, but for the most part, this final form is fantastic. It's my 4th favorite final form out of the 12 I have witnessed. As Eiji slowly loses his humanity thanks to these core metals, something else that's weird happens. Ankh finds his body moving around by itself and has to try and regain that form without being overtaken by the new Ankh. As that happens though, Ankh starts getting in the way of Eiji and gets them to start fighting. While they have fought in the past about different ideals, this is the part of the show where their relationship strains the most, and it leads to such amazing scenes. Then Ankh is able to overcome his clone and take back his own body, and ultimately betrays Eiji to fight with Maki to become the vessel for the ultimate greed. As he is about to take on Eiji, the argument that ensues between the two stirs him a bit, as Eiji reveals his own desire, which is to protect others by gaining strength, and Eiji thanks Ankh for helping him find this desire, which leads to Maki making Eiji go berserk by giving him another core metal, and telling Ankh that he's no longer going to be the vessel for his plan. As Ankh fights Eiji's greed form, he tells Eiji not to go berserk and to fulfill his desire the way he was doing it before, and as this happens, Maki then damages one of his core metals and takes the rest of them, leaving one set of core metals for Ankh. Then as Ankh and Eiji attempt to take down Maki, Azuva now becoming the vessel fights off Akira and Shintaro, Ankh sacrifices himself by giving Eiji his metals to use the Tajidora combo, which by the way doesn't make it count as a final form. This debate is fucking stupid and I won't mention any more about it. As this happens, Eiji is able to take down Maki while Ankh in spirit protects him. As the battle ends, Ankh dies, fulfilled at what he's accomplished, and with my favorite line from him, he is gone.
お前が掴む腕はもう俺じゃないってことだ。
And with Eiji taking both of the pieces left of Ankh's core metal, he goes on another journey to repair him with funds from the Kogami Foundation to help him out at every turn. As I've said before, the dynamic between the two is fantastic, and is honestly my favorite aspect of the show. Ankh's seriousness and devious nature contrasting very well with Eiji's goofiness. I love so many of the comedic scenes between the two. Their chemistry is just fantastic, and the journey they both go on throughout this show is just fantastic overall. You really get to see how much they can change as the series goes. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is Kamen Rider OOO. A fantastic start for anyone looking to get into Kamen Rider, as it takes the structure a lot of the seasons use, as well as show off the strength of the character writing and theming involved. So many great characters and villains, with my favorite being Ankh. I just love him so much as well as all the amazing action in the show offers, and the fucking fantastic music. There was one story detail I didn't go over as it wasn't too important for this show and was mostly relegated to a movie, so I won't go over it here. Maybe one day I'll do the movies. Maybe when I fucking croak. For now, this is the end of my first review of Kamen Rider April. Hopefully for any newcomers skipping over the spoiler bits I put in this review, I hope you got inspired to watch this series as I did way back when I heard of this season thanks to Manga Kamen. I'll also recommend Thomas Jujube for anyone wanting to get into Kamen Rider. He makes pretty good videos about the show, and even other Toei shows like Ultraman, Super Sentai, and much more. I'd also recommend Marco Satsu for more informative videos about how each season is made and the legacy they hold. So for my overall ranking of OOO, I'd rank it as my second favorite season of Kamen Rider out of the 12 I've seen. It was close to getting outdone, but has yet to relinquish this spot. But with all the high praise I have for the season, what could possibly be better than this? Well, that's the season I'll be reviewing next. And which season is it, you ask?
Orange Arms 花道 on stage
That's right, Kamen Rider Gaim is the next review, coming next Saturday, so I'll say no more and see this video off. See you guys next week, and take care.